You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we're previewing the Test series between Australia and Pakistan. And summer has truly arrived in Australia, with the first Test match of the summer approaching fast between Australia and Pakistan. You pretty much know that the Australian summer is about to commence. And it's been a bit of a late start to the Australian summer this year because of the World Cup, obviously, in India. So everything's been pushed back ever so slightly. But I think everyone would agree that we're all excited for this Test series between Australia and Pakistan, and then the Test series against Australia and the West Indies to follow. Australia looking to cap off a very successful campaign in year, which saw them win the WTC against India, which saw them retain the Ashes, and obviously winning the World Cup recently in India. So Australia looking to have a dominant summer and a dominant series against Pakistan. They do start off as favourites to win this series. And looking to just finish off the year and cap off what has been a very good year. So plenty for Australia to play for. For Pakistan, going into this series against Australia, will present challenges. Will present a lot of challenges for Pakistan. Pakistan, after the World Cup in India, have changed everything. Behind the scenes, different captain for the Test side. Obviously, Babar Azam stepping down. Shah Masoon is now the new captain of the Test side. He will face a lot of challenges in this series against Australia. Also, different selection committee, different selectors. Players have been brought in, new players in this Test squad for Pakistan. So a lot of changes for Pakistan behind the scenes, and they're going to be facing a lot of challenges in this series against Australia. So it's definitely going to be an interesting series. It's going to be a series where both teams will want to do well in. So we have lots to talk about in this episode today, previewing the Test series, talking about both teams, their chances, their squads, who will be the players to stand up with bat and ball, and many other things to discuss as well. So there's plenty to discuss. Let's get into it. Let's have a look at the Test series fixture between Australia and Pakistan. 3 Test matches in this Test series. The first Test match will be played at the Perth Stadium. That will be on December the 14th. The second Test, the traditional Boxing Day Test match at the MCG, played on the 26th of December. And the third and final Test of the series, the traditional New Year's Test in Sydney at the SCG. That will be played on the 3rd of January. Let's have a look at the Test stats between Australia and Pakistan in Test matches over the years. Head-to-head in Test matches overall, Australia lead that. 34 wins to Australia to Pakistan's 15. Both teams' records in Australia in terms of Test matches. Australia won 26 Test matches in Australia to Pakistan's 4 Test matches in Australia. Leading run scorer is Javed Mandad with 1,797 runs. Leading wicket taker is Shane Warne with 90. Most dismissals, Rod Marsh with 68. Most catches, Mark Waugh with 23. Most matches, Javed Mandad with 25. And the first Test match that Australia and Pakistan played was back in 1956. Let's talk about how Australia and Pakistan will go about things in this Test series. And let's start with the home side, Australia, and talk about their squad and challenges and who will be the players to stand up with bat and ball and what they need to do to try and win this series against Pakistan, and talk about their chances and prospects. So we'll start off with the squad. Now, Australia have selected their squad for this first Test match of the series only. So the first Test squad that Australia have selected for the first Test match of the series against Pakistan: Cummins, Boland, Carey, Green, Hazelwood, Head, Khawaja, Labuschagne, Lyon, Mitchell Marsh, Morris, Smith, Stark and Warner. And that's the squad that Australia have selected for the first Test match of the series against Pakistan. It's a pretty strong squad. Nothing more to add on, really. It's a pretty good squad. Good batting, good bowling, very strong in those departments. It's a typical Australian Test squad that you would see every time that Australia select a squad for a series. And it's a pretty strong squad, as I mentioned. And I think Australia should do well in this series. They should dominate, like they did in 2019-20, when they won the series 2-0. They won the first 2 Test matches by an innings in that series. It was only a 2-game series back in 2019-20. They won both of those Test matches by an innings, and Pakistan really struggled. So I do see that sort of happening again for Australia, I think. I think they will perform well, and I think they will have a dominant series. Pakistan have many challenges, as we will discuss later on in this episode about their challenges. But for Australia, they start off as favourites. You know, it's been a very good year for the Australian team. They've won the World Test Championship. They've retained the Ashes. They've won the World Cup recently in India. So I think this Australian team in this summer would like to perform well. For many of them, it could be the last time we may see them play a Test match in Australia. Obviously, for David Warner, it's probably the last time we'll see him play a Test series for Australia, because obviously he announced his potential retirement at the end of this series against Pakistan in Sydney. That's been talked about a lot. Also, you know, for other members of the squad, they would like to perform well and make sure that they have a pretty good summer. As I said, very strong with the batting. You've got the likes of, obviously, Travis Head. Wonderful form he's in over the last few months and years. Usman Khawaja, you've got Marnus Labuschagne, you've got Mitchell Marsh, who's come back all of a sudden to the Australian Test side. Alex Carey can score some runs. And Steve Smith, who is capable, as we know, a very fine player. And David Warner would like to finish off very well in Test cricket. He would like to score a few hundreds before he signs off. So it's a very strong batting lineup. So you've got Cameron Green, who is emerging, and he probably won't play in the first Test because of Mitchell Marsh's form, but he's a good option to have in the squad nonetheless. And then you have a look at the bowling. The bowling is very good. Nathan Lyon returns. Nathan Lyon, good to see him back after that calf injury in the Ashes. He would like to perform well for Australia in this Test series against Pakistan. Obviously closing in on 500 Test wickets, so he'll definitely get that this summer. And then you've got Scott Boland, who's been very good, as we know. Lance Morris, exciting prospect in the squad. He may get an opportunity if either the other bowlers have a rest in Stark, Cummins and Hazelwood, who are pretty good bowlers themselves and should do well in this series. So you have a look at Australia's bowling, pretty strong. And Australia, some of the players did well in the last series. Back in 2019-20, there's only 4 players. There's 8 players that played in the last series back in 2019-20. David Warner, Marnus Labuschagne, Steve Smith, Travis Head, Mitchell Stark, Josh Hazelwood, Pat Cummins and Nathan Lyon are the surviving members from the squad who played in the last series where Pakistan last toured, and that was back in 2019-20. And all of them had a pretty good series, except for a few. David Warner scored that triple century in the Adelaide Oval, 335 not out. He scored 489 runs in that series. He'll be hoping to replicate that again if he can, to try and finish off in style in Test cricket, because coming towards the end, and we all know he planned his retirement to finish at the SCG at the end of this series. Marnus Labuschagne had a good series last time Pakistan were out here. He scored 200s, highest score of 185. He scored 347 runs. And Steve Smith had a quiet series in the last series that Pakistan were out here. He only scored 40 runs. So he'll be hoping to have a big series and a big summer, Smith, because the last few summers in Australia hasn't really dominated. So he's got a point to prove that he's still got it. And also Travis Head, back in 2019-20, struggled against Pakistan. He only scored 24 runs in that series. But obviously it was a different Travis Head. He was uncertain about his spot, and he was just finding his feet in Test cricket. But now, as we know with Travis Head, he's certainly a different player than he was 4 years ago. A very different player, as we know, and he's in very good touch. Also, the bowling, that was the batting, but also the bowling. You know, Mitchell Starc had a good series last time. He took 14 wickets. Hazelwood took 10. Cummins took 8. And Lyon took 7 wickets. So the Australian bowlers had a pretty good series in the last series against Pakistan. So I think for Australia, you know, it's an opportunity for certain players to really stand up and have a good series against Pakistan, but also against the West Indies later on in the summer. And I think Australia will be looking to, you know, kick off the WTC cycle, which is the new cycle. They'll be looking to get some points and look to play some good Test cricket and really, you know, perform well and really dominate the series against Pakistan. So in saying that, I think Australia will be favourites to start the series, as they should, because it's at home. It's against Pakistan, who've struggled for many years in Australia. But it's a pretty good squad in both batting and bowling departments. And Pat Cummins' captaincy as well. Obviously, you have, on the other hand, Pakistan have a new captain in Shan Masoon, who will be tested. He hasn't really done it much in international cricket for Pakistan. All of a sudden, he's been thrusted the responsibility of captain of Pakistan because of Babar Azam stepping down. Whereas with Pat Cummins, he's really developed as a leader. We saw that in the World Cup, where he had a pretty good captaincy experience in the World Cup. Obviously, he was tested, but I think that's really improved his captaincy and will definitely serve him well going into this series against Pakistan and also the series against the West Indies. So, you know, Pat Cummins, he'll be looking to, you know, improve and continue with his captaincy improvement. So finishing off about Australia, as I said, they should dominate. They're a strong team. They're World Test Championship winners. They're playing at home. It's the first Test series since the Ashes. So it's been a long time since Australia have played a Test match. But no doubt they will want to perform well in this series against Pakistan. And I think they should perform well in the series. And I think a lot of players will want to excel with bat and with the ball in this Test series against Pakistan. Let's talk about Pakistan and how they will go about things in this Test series against Australia. Talk about their squad and the challenges and what they need to do to try and win this Test series in Australia-Pakistan. So first of all, let's have a look at their Test squad that Pakistan have selected for this Test series. Masoon, Shafiq, Azam, Al-Haq, Rizwan, Saheem, Sarfraz Ahmed, Shakil, Jamal, Salman, Ashraf, Wasim, Abrar Ahmed, Hassan Ali, Shahzad, Hamza, Norman Ali, and Shaheen Shah Afridi. That's the Test squad that Pakistan have assembled for this Test series against Australia. Pakistan, obviously, this Test series against Australia, it's going to be another test for them. It's going to be a big challenge. Pakistan, their overall record in Australia is not the best. They haven't won a Test series in Australia at all. And they've been touring Australia since 1964-65, Pakistan, and they haven't won a single Test series in that time. They've done well to draw 3 Test series in that time, but Australia have dominated. Australia have won 10 of the series since 1964-65. Pakistan haven't won any. There have been 3 drawn series, and Pakistan have only won 4 Test matches in Australia. The last time they won a Test in Australia, Pakistan, was back in 1995-96. Australia won that series 2-1 in the best of 3. So it's a long time since Pakistan have tasted success in Australia in terms of winning a Test match. So we all know that Pakistan struggled in Australia. The stats, the history behind that suggests that. This time around will be a bigger challenge. The last series, which was played in 2019-20, they lost that 2-game Test series quite badly. Both of the Test matches they lost by an innings. The first Test at the Gabba they lost by an innings and 5 runs. The second Test at the Adelaide Oval, where David Warner scored his triple century, they lost by an innings and 48 runs. So it wasn't a great series last time for Pakistan in 2019-20. And I do have a feeling that this series in 2023, 2024 will be the same. I think they will struggle, and they'll definitely be up against it. Obviously, the team has gone under a change in terms of backroom staff. The team has a different captain. Shah Masoon is now captain. Babar Azam stood down. So a lot of changes. Also, a lot of new players coming into the squad that haven't played much Test cricket themselves. So it's definitely a big change for Pakistan that they're trying to do, try and get back on track and rebuild their cricket team, which often doesn't help whenever you have massive changes. It always doesn't help when things are getting changed around. It doesn't help cohesion within the team. So I think for Pakistan, this series, there's going to be a lot of challenges. Let's talk about those challenges. Well, number one, they have a lack of experience in playing in Australian conditions. Now, you have a look at the squad that they've assembled. There's only 5 players that played in the last series and have experience playing Test cricket in Australia. So the 5 players that have played in the last series, which was back in 2019-20, that's Babar Azam, Iman Al-Haq, Mohammad Rizwan, Shan Masoon, the captain, and Shaheen Shah Afridi. They're the only 5 players to play a Test match in Australia and a Test series. Everyone else, it's their first time playing in Australia. So that's number one, is the lack of experience in Test cricket in Australia. So they only have 5 players, as I mentioned, that have played in Australia before. Also, you have a new captain in Shah Masoon, who hasn't captained much international cricket for Pakistan. Obviously, Babar Azam stood down as captain after the World Cup because he didn't want to do it anymore. And Shah Masoon was instated as the new Test captain for Pakistan. And he's someone that hasn't been in the Test squad all that often, Shah Masoon. He's either in or out of the Test squad. Now he's coming back in all of a sudden as captain. So a new captain, inexperience of captaining in Australia. He hasn't captained much. He has captained domestically. He has captained over in England for a few matches. I think for Derbyshire in the T20 Blast or something like that. But this is going to be a different test for Shah Masoon. Being captain in Australia in a Test series for the first time is going to be a massive challenge for him. How will he go? That will be the big test. And also, he's coming off some good form. In the Prime Minister's 11 match before this series, in the warm-up match, he scored a double century. I think he scored 201 not out. So he's scoring some runs. That's good for him, and that's good for the team going into this series. But as captain, he has to really stand up. And he will have to rely on Babar Azam a little bit for a bit of experience. He will have to rely on the senior players who have been around the side for a very long time, just to bounce off some ideas. As captain, it is a tough job in a cricket team to be captain. So that's another challenge. How will Shah Masoon go as captain? He will really need to stand up. Pakistan, what happened in the last series is that their bowling went for runs. It was inexperienced, their bowling attack. And they conceded some big totals. They conceded 580 and 589 because Australia only batted once in both Test matches in the last series in 2019-20. The bowlers went around the park. Shaheen Shah Afridi, in that series, it was his first Test series to Australia. He took 5 wickets at an average of 36. And the rest of the bowling attack struggled. So if people remember what happened last time, is that their bowling struggled immensely. This time around, their bowling is quite inexperienced. Not many of them have played Test cricket before. Not many of them have played a handful of Test matches either. So, Shaheen Shah Afridi will be relied on to lead this attack. And you also have Hassan Ali as well, who's played a few Test matches. They're the most experienced players that have played in terms of the Pakistan bowling attack. All the others have played a handful of Test matches, and some of them haven't even played some Test cricket before. So I do think that Pakistan's bowling is going to struggle again in this series. And do they have the ability to take 20 wickets? Do they have the ability to keep Australia down and put them under some sort of pressure. You know, with Australia, they have a strong batting lineup. They have Labuschagne, they have Head, they have Smith, they have Warner, Mitchell Marsh, Alex Carey can score some runs. So even Usman Khawaja as well can score runs. So it's going to be important for Pakistan. Can they take 20 wickets? I do see the bowlers struggling again because of that. Inexperience, but also inexperience in Australia in terms of bowling in these conditions. Obviously for Pakistan, I guess their greatest strength is their reverse swing capabilities. Once the ball gets a bit older, they can test the Australian batters with some reverse swing. But when the ball is hard and new on a flat surface in Perth and then Melbourne and then Sydney, they will have to be on their game to try and keep Australia down to a manageable target or total of some sort. So their bowling probably could be their weakest link in this series. Their batting, on the other hand, they've got some good batters who are capable of scoring runs. You've got Shah Masood, the captain. You've got Abdullah Shafiq. You've got Babar Azam, Aman Al-Haq, Mohammad Rizwan. Can score some runs. And I think for Pakistan to win this series, they'll have to bowl well, number one. But also they'll have to bat well. They'll have to score some big targets and big totals if they are going to challenge Australia. So you've got to get in, get set on these flat surfaces, and you really got to make it count. So they're going to rely heavily on Shah Masood, Abdullah Shafiq, Babar Azam, Aman Al-Haq, Mohammad Rizwan. Then all the other players who come after them have to bat well and have to really stand up. You know, they're all-rounders and the tail-enders. Every run will count for Pakistan. So they will need to score big runs with the bat, take 20 wickets to win. And they will have to play at 110%, Pakistan. They can't play at 100%. They've got to play at 110%. Maybe even 120, maybe even 150 if they are going to win this series, because they have struggled in Australia, as I mentioned earlier in the past. So for Pakistan, they're not the favourites to win. But often when you're not the favourites to win a series, you often play well. And the pressure will be put on the other side, the opposition, in this case Australia, who are the favourites to win. Everyone expects Australia to win this series 3-0. Pressure will be on them to perform well. Not so much on Pakistan, because everyone will mention, as we're mentioning in this episode today, the challenges, right? Their bowling's inexperience, may struggle in these conditions. Their batting is good and capable of scoring runs, but can they succumb and overcome the pressure from Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins and Lyon in terms of Australia's bowling attack? So Pakistan, they can do something here. We know that with Pakistan. They tend to play some good cricket at times, and then other times they don't play some good cricket. That's just how Pakistan are. They're up and down. But as I said, they got to do everything right. Their fielding is going to be important as well. They can't be sloppy in the field. We know Pakistan's fielding in the past can be a bit poor. They got to be on in the field. They got to bat well. They got to bowl well. Shah Masood's got to captain well and make good decisions. If they can do that, Pakistan play above their limit and threshold as a side, they can win this series. But it's going to be a challenge, no doubt about that. So they really have to really knuckle down. And, you know, some of the batters that they have in this side, Babar Azam in the last series, back in 2019-20, he scored 210 runs at an average of 52.5. He scored a century and he scored a 50. Mohammad Rizwan, you know, played pretty well in the series. He scored 177 runs at an average of 44. He scored a half century, highest score of 95. And then Shah Masood, the captain, he had an okay series back in 2019-20. He scored 156 runs at an average of 39, scored a half century, which was a highest score of 68. And obviously Aman Al-Haq, he only played one test match and he scored 2 runs in the one test match that he played in that series. So, as I said, they've got capable batters who can score runs. The bowling will be tested. How will Shaheen Shah Afridi go about things? Can he take wickets? Can he get the ball to swing? Can he get the ball to reverse swing when it's older? How will the spinners go for Pakistan, because in Australia it doesn't turn as much as it does in the subcontinent. And I guess Pakistan is sort of used to pitches in Pakistan being flat and not really spin friendly, which is often the case in Pakistan. They don't spin as much as they do in India, for example. So they will be tested in every department, Pakistan. But they got to believe. I think that's the important thing for Pakistan here, is they got to believe. If you believe we can do something and we can win and, put your mind towards something, then you can often achieve something. But that's going to be the thing for Pakistan. If the first test match of the series is going to be so critical for them. If they do well there, if they do well or if they perform well, let's just say if Australia win the test in Perth, the first test, and they lose quite badly, Pakistan, then I think that's going to really hit their morale around. And then they're probably going to not believe that they can achieve something in this series. But if they have a good performance, if they're competitive, certain players stand up with the bat and with the ball, then I think that will give them some sort of belief. So to finish off about Pakistan, big challenges in this series. With bat and ball, every department, they have to play better than Australia. That's the only way they're going to win this series. They're capable, but for me, there's some concerns. As I mentioned, their bowling looks a little bit thin, inexperienced at test level, especially here in Australia. Their batting is capable, but can they overcome the pressure from the Australian bowlers, who are pretty good? The likes of Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, and Nathan Lyon. So they will be tested, Pakistan. And Shan Masoon, as I mentioned before, he will be tested as captain. He will really need to stand up as a leader. In saying that, Pakistan, they can turn things around. They can change their record in Australia. They can make it better. But they've got to believe, and if they believe, who knows? They may win the series. They may win a test match. We'll have to wait and see over the 3 test matches of this series. Let's predict who will win the test series, leading run scorer and leading wicket taker for this test series against Australia and Pakistan. Now, the last series that Australia played against Pakistan in Australia was back in 2019-20. Australia won the series 2-0. And my prediction in terms of the series winner, I think I'm going to go with Australia again. I think it's going to be another dominant series for Australia. I think they're going to win 3-0. Given that Pakistan do struggle in Australia, Pakistan do have an inexperienced bowling lineup. Also, their batting is capable of scoring runs, but can they score enough runs to put Pakistan in a good position in the 3 test matches up against a very good Australian bowling attack? So I think Australia will have another dominant series like they did in 2019-20. So Australia to win 3-0. Depends if the weather plays ball in Sydney. We all know what happens there with the weather in Sydney. So they could win 2-0 Australia or 3-0. Depends on the weather, of course, in Sydney. Let's hope it doesn't rain this time around. So in terms of leading run scorer and leading wicket taker for the series, my predictions for that, I've gone with Travis Head to be the leading run scorer. I think Travis Head, given the form that he's in, obviously had a pretty good World Cup, scored that wonderful century in the final against India. He's in good touch, he's in good form. If he gets going, I think he's going to have a good series. And why not? Because he's in such good touch and a rich vein of form at the moment. So I think he's probably going to be the leading run scorer for the series. In terms of the leading wicket taker for the series as well, I've gone with Pat Cummins, the Australian captain, leading from the front. He's a good bowler, as we know. He's becoming a very important player for Australia, of course, obviously being captain now and obviously one of the main bowlers that they rely on. So I think he's going to have a good series. He had a pretty good series with the ball last time against Pakistan. He took 8 wickets in that series. So I think he's going to do better in 2023, 2024 with the ball against Pakistan in this series. So I've gone with him as the leading wicket taker. Now, if you're listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know in the comments your predictions for the series in terms of who will win the series, leading run scorer and leading wicket taker. We would love to know what you have to say on those predictions in the comments, so do let us know. My final thoughts for this preview of the Test series between Australia and Pakistan. Australia and Pakistan have a rich cricketing history, as we know, starting way back in 1956 when both the teams played the first ever Test match between the two countries back in Pakistan in 1956. They've had a rich cricketing history, these two countries, since then. And over the years, both teams have produced some great players and great performances in that time. And let's hope in 2023-24 in this Test series, we will see some outstanding performances and some players who will emerge in front of our eyes as well, and really put in some good performances for both teams. Obviously, both teams will be playing for the Beno Kadir Trophy, obviously, which was introduced in the last series in Pakistan in 2022 to acknowledge two very fine leg spinners for Australia and Pakistan in Richie Beno and Abdul Qadir. So both teams will be contesting that trophy in this series. Who will win the trophy in 2023-24 in this Test series in Australia? Only time will tell. And both teams will be determined to play some good cricket, perform well, and both teams will be looking to win that trophy and win the series. So at the end of the day, let's hope we have some good Test match cricket between Australia and Pakistan in this series, and may the best team win. Thanks everyone for listening to our preview of the Test series between Australia and Pakistan. Stay tuned for more episodes and live streams on the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast from the Australia versus Pakistan Test series. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this Test series between Australia and Pakistan in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.